Okay, collector's diary. I thought I'd go back to the sort of shooting piecemeal, doing bits as they come in and what have you. It's my day off. I've just worked 3 days solid, which at my age is, it's a bit much. And recently I've had a blood test this morning, and I'm taking my blood pressure regularly because as some of you will know on the channel, I've had some issues with that recently. Getting old, you see, this is the trouble. But with age comes experience and knowledge over many, many years in the trade. So what does the reliable authoritative voice of vintage SF have to say today? Well, first of all, I've just posted a book out to Matt at Bookpilled in San Diego many weeks after promising to do so. So that's on the way. So that's good. So I'm glad he should get that in about a week, which is great. And he put a new book haul up this morning. Of course, you're not going to see this till about weeks after I film it, so the time paradox thing happens again. But he mentioned that nobody ever mentions this, Neverness by David Sindel. So there you go, I've mentioned it. Huge tome. I am friendly with David Sindel online, and he's a really good guy. He's very rational. And, this was huge at the time, massive, sort of late 80s, was it? Let's just have a look. Can't remember. Absolutely huge. Had loads and loads of acclaim. Let's see, sort of 89, so there you go. This is a later reprint, lovely A format as you see. So there you are, I've mentioned it as well. I'll sort of go back to that one day at some point. Let's say he's a good guy. What else have I had recently? Well, I'm hoping the postman will come this morning because there's been postal strikes in the UK and, it's all been a bit higgledy-piggledy, so everything comes at once. So I had a few parcels yesterday. So what have I got here? Well, here's a nice one. The Oxygen Barons by Gregory Feely. Always loved that title. It's in the Terry Carr Ace Science Fiction Special series. Same livery as the first edition of Neuromancer. Now, the first edition of Neuromancer is one of these. It's not a hardcover, it's a paperback original like this. And these are great things. They're quite hard to pick up in good nick, but I got this from the very wonderful Andy of Cold Tonnage Books very cheaply. So there we go. So looking forward to it. I always loved that title, The Oxygen Barons. Now, I am actually at the moment I'd say not in the middle of, I'm about a third the way through my 1990s SF TBR. I'm not going to talk about that until I've read a few more. I think I'm going to do 2 videos on that front. So I'm working my way through that. And I think by the time you see this, you'll have seen I've done at least one more Silverberg video. And I'm sort of, as I say, I'm edging towards completism. And something that I picked up recently is World of a Thousand Colours, which is one of the more obscure Silverberg anthologies. And I did have my eyes on an American hardcover one, which I'd seen somewhere in Hay on Wye. There was one online in Ireland. It's quite uncommon, but this has got a Jim Burns jacket, and the Jim Burns jacket, and I got this from Andy at Cold Tonnage, which is great, and reasonable prices and always fantastic nick. So isn't that beautiful? Few stories in here I've read, few I haven't. I am going to do a Silverberg short stories thing at some point, or maybe a Silverberg roundup of how the collection's coming on. So that's World of a Thousand Colours. We'll stick that on the podium. And of course, we're shooting in the restricted sort of area, the corner of the hideout. So I'll just pop that up there. What else have I had in the post? Well, also, I've just had the lovely people at River Run, marvellous publisher, sent me this proof copy of my friend Nina Allen's new book. This is not published till the 11th of May next year. And that's the day after my birthday. And the last time I saw Nina, we're in touch via email and what have you, was about, gosh, when was it? It was before the pandemic, but a year before the pandemic. And she was doing like a tour promoting her book, The Doll Maker, which was new in hardcover then. And it had like a floral gothic cover. Very interesting story about a dwarf who collects dolls and a relationship he has by post, and very interesting. And Nina was appearing at a lovely little bookshop in Frome, which is about 15 miles from me, really interesting town. And it's a bookshop called Hunting Raven, good little indie. And I'm going to shoot there sometime soon. In fact, by the time you see this, I might have shot there. And it's great. And Nina did an event there, and they do some of their events in this pub around the corner, which is a great little pub. It's actually a hotel more than a pub, but it is open as a pub as well. And I can't for the life of me think what it's called, but they do draft Kirin. That's the Japanese beer that Case drinks in Neuromancer and in the first scene. So of course, you know, when I read that years ago, I didn't have my first Kirin for years, and occasionally I'd pick up a pint in London. You don't see it very much. It's a really, really nice lager. So, but anyway, back to the point. So anyway, Nina did her event there, and I was there, and me and my friend Graham, he of the Stunning SF collection, we went for a drink with her afterwards, and she's a great lady, and we had a catch up because I hadn't seen her a couple of years before that. She did an event with me in Bath. So this is Conquest, her new book, and this will be a hardcover. So the lovely people at River End have sent me this, and there's a little AI sheet in here, advanced information. So that I'm going to read probably quite soon. There'll be a full review nearer the time, because there's no point me doing a full review now, because one, I haven't read it, and two, when I do read it, and I will read it before Christmas probably, it may end up in my books of the year, but I'll do the full review next year near to publication, so you can know what I think. And she does all sorts of things. Her last book was a kind of metaphysical crime novel, but it's very difficult to describe, but her SF stuff's really good. And this is about a coder, you know, a guy called Frank, and computer coding, and he sees patterns in everything, which is interesting because, you know, I was talking about the Pie Man by Alfred Bester and pattern recognition by William Gibson's a favourite of mine. And he has these theories which become irrational. His girlfriend becomes concerned about him, and so it looks like a sort of combination of a crime and SF novel. Now, of course, lots of SF novels have crime conceits, so there you go. So Conquest, that's what we'll talk about for next year. Oh, there's the postman, bear with me. Okay, false alarm, it wasn't the postman, it was just somebody dropping a leaflet through the door. Still, it's happened to us all, hasn't it? Anyway, so there we go. What's next? We've done Nina Allen, and what else have I got? Well, until the postman arrives, I think I've only got one more thing to show you today, but what a thing it is, a thing of beauty. I've wanted one of these for years. Now, this is a book I've read. I bought it when it first came out in the UK as a Paladin paperback, which I'll show you again, because I'm going to do a feature about Paladin SF in the late 80s, with particular reference to one writer. But this is something I'm really pleased to get. I got it from AB, from a dealer I've never bought anything from before, and they've done a lovely job of looking after it, and it's almost like new. And this is Philip K. Dick's Puttering About in a Small Land. Look at that for a jacket. Beautiful. 1985, hardcover original. And let's have a look. World First Edition, published by Academy Chicago Publishers. Very, very, very nice. And this, as I say, is one of Dick's mainstream novels. I think it was a paperback at 87. I bought all of these as they came out in the UK. Some went to Gollancz, so I've got Gollancz editions. I've got various ones from American publishers. The Gollancz ones were usually not world first, just first UK's. And I love Philip K. Dick's mainstream novels. Like his science fiction, you know, they vary. They were all written in the 1950s. Until you get to things like the transmigration of Timothy Archer, which was towards the very end of his life. And they're mostly about small-time life in 50s sort of California, and they're really, really good. You know, the sort of consumerism is going, television salesman, sort of traveling salesman. There's a lot about commerce in them, about relationships. And, you know, once you get past about the first three, you know, Dick's style, which he's using in the same way in his concurrent SF short stories and his early SF novels, is there. And I really like them. I think, you know, as I say, some are better than others. Only one was published during his lifetime, and that was Confessions of a Crap Artist, which is really the same book as Time Out of Joint, but without the SF content. So I'm going to talk about these. Hardly anybody talks on YouTube about the mainstream novels, and I love them all. I think they're great. So I'm going to do a bit of rereading, and I'll cover them off at some point. So I was really pleased to get that, because that is very uncommon in the UK. So I think that's sort of today's mini book haul. And as I say, the postman, hopefully he'll bring some more stuff later. So I might actually film an unboxing if he does. So there's loads of stuff on the way. So that's great. Oh yeah, thanks for everybody who did super thanks in the last month or so. It's made a big difference because the channel's still small and growing. And, you know, it has been a struggle to keep. I decided it was time to get out of the hideout. It's Sunday morning. It's the day the clocks have gone back. So according to the clock, it's 9:15, which means it's actually about 7:45. So I'm sort of enjoying a bit of solitude as I walk along the lane here. Yeah, later on in the hideout, I'm going to do some unboxing, or rather, the stuff I've got is already unboxed. I have some stuff from Zardoz All You Need Is Books. Hi Morris, I'm going to be over shooting at Zardoz in Dutton Marsh in a few days time. Morris is one of the UK's biggest paperback dealers, probably the UK's biggest paperback dealer, easy. His inventory currently is around 53,000 items on ABE books. ABE books, I always got ABE, I don't know why. Well, another day, another acquisition, as they say. So what have we had recently since the last time I recorded part of this video? Well, let's see. I was probably inspired by Jules Burt, my old chum. He's got his own channel, of course. If you don't know Jules Burt's channel, do check it out. And he had quite a nice book haul recently. He bought a lot from somebody of old SF. Lots of UFO books in there as well, some quite scarce ones, which is interesting. And had some nice anthologies in there. And it made me realise that, you know, I really need to complete my New World's Sphere collection. And because I've read everything in these, of course, with one or two exceptions. And I didn't have, I think there were 8 of these, and then there were a couple from Corgi. And I've got most of them, but you know, they're quite hard to find in good nick. But I recently managed to do a little deal on eBay with a dealer I never worked with before, and they had like a lot. And I said, look, if you pull out those 2, I'll give you this, blah blah blah. And I got New Worlds 1, and this of course is when it went from being like a sort of A4 type magazine back to a paperback book, and I kind of prefer these in a way. And you know, there's some great stuff in this. We'll just have a quick look now, and there's the usual sort of like grumpy editorial by Moorcock, because he says, you know, everything is terrible in SF, you know, and standards are not improving, blah blah. But you know, he sounds like me now. And there's great stuff in here. You know, there's Tom Dish, David Red. I think I showed you a David Red book a while ago, Welsh SF writer. Ballard, M. John Harrison's Lamia and Lord Cromis, wonderful Draconium story. Also Sladek, Keith Roberts, Aldous, Barrington Bailey. You know, and a polemical essay by M. John. You know, it's just fantastic stuff. You know, it really is the quality. And I got number 3 as well, because I was missing that one. And again, all cracking stuff in here. What's interesting about this one is that a couple of the authors are using their pseudonyms in it. And if we just have a look, there's, for example, The Machine in Shaft 10 by Joyce Churchill, who is, of course, M. John Harrison. And The Machine in Shaft 10, of course, is the title of his collection, which is long out of print, and that contains some of the stories that he, you know, is kind of suppressed. He doesn't want them reissued. So there you go. There's also I Lose Medea by Alistair Bevan, which is, of course, Keith Roberts. And it says illustrated by Kingston. Now, of course, Keith Roberts' real name was John Kingston. So, you know, you've got sort of several layers of pseudonym going on there. And I Lose Medea, I think, is in the Grain Kings. It's in one of the collections later on. And it's great stuff, you know. Let's see if we can see the picture. Bear with me. So, of course, with NY, you always have, look at that. You also have these nice illustrations as well, you know, because there's artistic guys, you know, New Worlds. And who else is in this? All the usual or unusual suspects. There's a Christopher Priest in here, Head in the Hand. There's a Pamela Sargent. She's very young at this stage, so that's interesting. And George Zabrowski. I read a Zabrowski recently, and I'll talk to you about that in the sort of first of my 90s TBR update. And I enjoyed it. It was good, actually. Very good. And there's also another essay by M. John, and you know, great stuff, really. So that's nice. So I need to pick up, I think, one more, which I don't have, and I'm hopefully going to get that from Morris at All You Need Is Books, Zardoz, so I'm visiting in a day or 2. And yeah, so then I think I'll have all 10 of them in paperback, and I should have done it years ago, but you know how it is. Speaking of things I have read which have not been so great, this is There Is No Darkness by Joe Haldeman and Jack Haldeman II, and it's got a bit of a rippled spine, and it's early 80s from Ace, and that's a Jim Burns jacket, which is really nice. And I've always loved that title, There Is No Darkness, and I hadn't read a Haldeman for ages, and I picked this up again from Zardoz, and it's very cheap, and I don't normally buy things with a leaning spine, but I thought I'd give it a go. And I have to say it's very, very, very minor. It's got that smoothness and readability of style that Haldeman does really well, and you get the sort of feeling he's sort of retreading the Forever War a bit. But it's a very, very minor book. The best thing I could say about it, other than the smoothness of the style, and is the fact that it's quite short. You didn't outstay its welcome. It's just 240 pages, and it has a sort of, the ending feels very tacked on. The early part is just sort of, guy comes from a planet where everybody is engineered to be really big, because it's a very, very tough colony world, and he sort of goes on this course and becomes like a student. He ends up on Earth, and you know, he ends up with a legal problem, and you've got to sort of battle your way out of it and to get some money. And he ends up fighting bears and, you know, bullfights and stuff like that. And it's, you know, the writing's fine, but it is a very minor one. But I do like the jacket. I think if it were in better nick, I'd hold on to it, because I do like Jim's stuff. But I've got a full sort of size, well, not a full size, but a bigger rendering of this in one of the Jim Burns books. So that's probably going to go on the sell pile, I would say. So what else have we got today? I'm still waiting for the postman to bring out the stuff. But, what did he bring today? Well, the UK first edition hardcover of The Book of Skulls by Robert Silverberg, here in Gollancz Fantasy and Macabre, rather than in the standard yellow jacket. And I've got a few of these, and I'm not a completist, you know that, and I'm going to try and get them all, because some of them are quite sort of expensive. And I got this from Fantastic Literature, Simon Gosden, thank you Simon, and I'd had my own it for a while. And this came out in 78. I think the book itself came out about 71. So this was a long time. So it's not a world first hardcover, but it's certainly the nicest cover it's had in hardcover. Though, you know, it's a pity the classic Jim Burns thing didn't get on the cover. But this is one of my favourite Silverbergs. And I've said before, what I love about this book is the indeterminacy of its genre. When you get to the end, you cannot tell whether you've read a science fiction novel, a fantasy novel, or a mainstream novel, because of the way that he withholds information. And that for me is sheer genius, because I'm very keen on you know, on sort of being sort of very clear about what genre books fit into. And I think it's doable, because I think there's only three genres. I think there's realism, fantasy, and SF, and they all emerged out of story. It's all tied to when they emerged in the age of the Enlightenment and what happened after that, and they're self-supporting. They prop each other up like three poles inside like a teepee. You know, there's no sort of crossover. You can talk about horror all you like, but horror is either crime, fantasy, or SF. You can talk about things like westerns and naval fiction. They're all just subsets of realism. You know, a collection of tropes is not a genre make. And yeah, so this is though is defying, and I love it, and I think it's one of his best written books. And why doesn't somebody make a film of this? It should be easy, it should be doable, good cast, good script. You'd be laughing, and it would look amazing as well, because, you know, the locations and setting. If you've never read this, you should. Even if you don't like SF, you should read it. Force it onto your friends, because it's marvellous. So yeah, very pleased with that. That's a major addition to the library. Actually, there is something else. You know, the old A format is sort of, you know, limping towards extinction. And the other day I decided to buy a couple of things which I had in work, which I stock, purely because they're in A format and because I want to keep the format going and show publishers that people are still interested. This is the complete stories of Asimov, Volume 1 in Harper Voyager. There it goes. And, you know, I've got a lot of these in other collections, and this is Volume 2. And, you know, what these sort of, I think, came out in the 90s in these liveries, or maybe a bit later. And let's have a look. And, you know, I'm not a massive Asimov fan. This paperback edition, 97. So, you know, they'd been around before that. But, you know, I'm even getting nostalgic about the contemporary livery on A format SF. So maybe I'll start an online position. A format is the thing. So, but they were so great. And I thought I want to keep it going, because, you know, a lot of the things you see in A format now, you see things like Warhammer books pop up in A format, and there are still sort of film tie-ins in A format. I've got a little one in work, which is that sort of recent sort of King Kong versus Godzilla, I think it is, or Skull Island, one of those things. It's just sort of things I bought when I was a kid, you know, so let's keep the A format going. So I think that's it for today. No doubt there'll be more soon. as I've said elsewhere, at some point before too long, I want to start doing more British SF with a focus on the sort of more pastoral and rural side, which is kind of difficult in the winter because of course, you know, you need the weather. So we'll have to see how things go. I mean, if this winter is like last winter, I was still filming outside in the sun in December, but I get the feeling that this is going to be a mild but maybe not so fine winter this time, so we'll see. Of course, part of the appeal of the English catastrophe novel is the whole back to the land, simple way of life, peace and quiet, agrarian existence sort of thing, which is so appealing to many of us. Are things getting out of hand in the hideout? Yes, is the simple answer. I've got most of a small cardboard box and a large bag full of stuff to move on. Some of this is things I've been reading for my 90s TBR, which at the moment is not going well in terms of the quality of what I'm discovering. More on that when I actually make those videos. It's going to be a little while yet because I've got a lot to get through. It's not been a positive experience so far, but we'll see. So I thought really this is probably going to be the last sort of tranche for this collector's diary, little roundup of bits and bobs, and I'll let you feast your eyes on this copy of Voice of the Whirlwind by Walter John Williams here, which is from the very wonderful Cold Tonnage books as ever. And I just thought I'd let you have a look at that, and that's the sequel to Hardwired. Never read it actually, I loved Hardwired back in the day, and it's signed as well. Look at that, you can see the usual glare factor here, and there we are. And I'm sort of doing a bit, I'm going to do a revisit of his work in the new year because I've acquired a few things which I haven't read, and I feel I've neglected him. And I always think of Roger Zelazny when I think of Williams, because Zelazny was very fond of his work, and he was regarded as a bit of a fake cyberpunk by some of the sort of like slightly cooler people, I think. I'm not sure those people are, but it's sort of, there were hints that he was a Johnny come lately, but Hardwired's really good fun, you know, it's great stuff. So this is a sequel, but it's set 200 years later, so it's sort of same universe sort of thing. But I've got some other stuff here. I have some things which I haven't shown you. I bought a little lot a while ago, a small lot. This is something, this is going to be my 90s TBR. And this is Carl Schroeder, as you see, Son of Sons, and it's got a bit of a, it's not a great spine, but this is just a reading copy. Schroeder's is probably most well known for Ventus, which is in the Broderick and De Filippo 101 SF book. I've not read him. I think this sort of hard SF. Larry Niven loved it, which isn't essentially a great thing for me. But he's going on this, the TBR read for the 90s and stuff. Ventus, as I say, is not available. It's quite hard to find in the UK. And it fetches quite good money, quite big money, because obviously it's in that book and it's out of print. And what's interesting is how much of the stuff from the period 1990 to 2010 is out of print, and a lot of it only had 1 or 2 printings. You know, these are books which haven't sort of become sort of canonical works in the big way in terms of catching on and being popular. And as I say, it's because people are still buying stuff from the golden age and stuff. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, you know, you've got to know the history, but there is a sort of like almost lost generations of these books. So it's quite an interesting experience. On that front, as part of another lot actually that I bought, I thought it was time to revisit this sort of fairly classic book, which is a book that I put in 100 must-read science fiction novels. And I think my friend Nick, my collaborator, wrote it up because I'd sort of stopped reading this author by then, though I did read this at the time. And I think this is a current livery. It's an American book, and this is Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson, of course. And I thought I'd give that another go at some point as well, since I'm on this 90s thing. So there you go, and really good Nick. And I say I think these are current American livery in A format, so it's what you want really. In said same lot, which was very, very reasonable. I quite like sort of wheel and deal with people on eBay. I got a couple of books by a female hard SF writer who you never hear much about. She's written quite a bit. Again, she's in the Broderick and De Filippo book. And I bought one of her books back in, when was it? About 2012 when that book first came out. And that's Linda Nagata. And this is The Boar Maker. Obviously that's a reference to Niels Bohr, the quantum physicist, and of course he famously said about quantum mechanics, "I don't like it and I wish I had nothing to do with it," which has always fascinated me as a quotation, because there are real issues with the fact that, you know, quantum mechanics doesn't always make sense, and a lot of sort of old school classical physicists, that they weren't happy about it, even though they had to acquiesce and realise that it was a thing, and lots of stuff wouldn't work without it. So that's The Ball Maker, and that's her first novel, and I haven't read this, and it's Bantam Spectra, and as I say, female hard SF writer, quite sort of uncommon, and her book, which was in the De Filippo and Broderick book, was this book, which is called Vast, which I think is her third novel. And I did have a hardcover first of this, which I sold for a fair whack of money, actually. I sold it for more than I paid for it. And I tried to read it once, didn't get on with it. I dropped it after about 40 pages. But of course, it is actually a quasi-sequel to something else. But when the 101 book came out, I was actually stocking this in a large format paperback in my shop, and selling it occasionally then. And I think I'll try and revisit it maybe if I get on with this one. Apparently the best one is the one which sort of comes in between these. Let's see if there's a title here. Let's have a look. I think it's Tech Heaven or Deception Well are meant to be better. But there you go. If you like hard SF and you've come across this name, maybe you should pick her up. And she's very, very hard. There's lots of physics and stuff. So that's Linda Nagata. So that's kind of interesting pair for you to maybe check out. Let's put them spine on so you can see them. Great name, Linda Nagata, isn't it? Really good. So there you go. Now, I have mentioned a couple of times in this collector diary that I'm about to visit Morris at All You Need Is Books. In fact, you're probably sick of me saying that now, and that's due in a few days. And I do buy from him fairly regularly. He has a huge inventory, again, as I've said, and you're fed of me saying. Here's a few things I bought from him recently. I've had a Hamlin kick, as you know, recently, Hamlin SF, and this is The Florians by Brian Stableford, which is the first Daedalus mission book, and I've got quite a few of these, and I think I'm missing one now. There's 6 altogether. I've read some of them. I've got some of them indoor. I really, really like the Hamlin covers. I'm not quite sure about this one with this strange dude in a globe. There you go, slightly flaky. Reminds me a bit of Invaders from Mars. You ever seen that? Old 50s SF film. Not particularly good one, but you know, it's worth seeing all the same. And it was remade with a Dan O'Bannon script in the late 80s, and it's really, really terrible. You know, it's not much better than the original, and that's pretty poor. So that's The Florians. That's the first one of those. So I got that, and that's typical of the sort of thing that Zardoz All You Need Is Books have in, you know, in big quantities. I also got this. This is Werner Vinge, or Werner Vinge. One day we'll clear up how we say his name. And this is his first novel, which is Grimm's World. And again, this is Hamlin again, as you see. And this was very cheap. And basically, this has been reissued under the title Thatcher Grimm's World. I think in the 90s and after. So his first book, this is from about 74, 75. And it looks like a Chris Foss cover to me. And, you know, it's very much something which I'm quite interested. Authors, when they become really, really famous, they often have obscure books people haven't read. And I am doing a bit of a VV thing, because I first read him back in 1986 when I was running a bookshop for Pan, and they used to get me to read manuscripts and advise on bids. And I advised them to buy the 2 books which were up then for bid for the UK. And they were Marooned in Real Time and The Peace War, and they subsequently published both of them, and I'd left the company by then. Even though I wasn't that fussed on the time, I could see that they were important books and probably needed to get issued in the UK. They didn't win the bids on the Greg Bear books, which is the ones I really wanted them to buy, but you know, there you go, that's the way it sort of goes sometimes. But yeah, so that's the first one. So I'm going to do a little video about VV, probably in the new year, because I want to read that, and there is something else I want to read, which I need to pick up. I've got it here somewhere. And there is a book of his which is really quite famous, but nobody seems to talk about on YouTube. They all talk about the same one. So we'll come on to that. So that'll be interesting, because I probably have some controversial things to say about him, because he is very much beloved. But as I say, we'll see. Now, as you know, we've had a lot. Hang on, a bit of a toothbrush moment there, second. Do my Jules Burt impression. There we are. Right. I have had, you know, the Silverberg mania of late, as you will have noticed, and as I say, I seem to be moving towards completism, but it probably won't happen that way. But this is one which I don't think this ever had a UK edition, and this is an Ace book. I mean, this published about 65, I think. And again, I got this from Sardot's All You Need Is Books, 64. This is a 1980 edition. So this must have been a magazine thing or something. And this is Time of the Great Freeze. And as I say, I don't ever recall seeing a UK edition of this. And I think a lot of his books which appeared in the mid-60s are things he wrote earlier in magazines, because there was a period where he didn't produce much SF at all and did loads of non-fiction. So this is about the remnants of mankind living underground during an ice age in 2300 AD. So that sounds quite interesting. That'll be comparable to Adam Roberts' later book, The Snow, John Christopher's World in Winter, several other sort of English catastrophe novels. I need to give this a polish on the back, actually. But that's an obscure Bob, which I'm very pleased to have in the library. And I'm looking forward to reading that, because he really is quite something. And the problem I'm having at the moment doing this 90s thing is because so far it hasn't been a great exercise for me. I keep getting drawn back to people I want to read and things I want to read more, and this is part of the problem with setting a TBR. And really this channel in terms of reading is all about my journey, and if you come along with that's absolutely fine, but I'm not sort of duty reading. If I duty read, it's for my own knowledge, so it's one of those things. But anyway, a couple of really beautiful things on the Bob front. So I need to move water a moment there. Let's just have a look. And yes, I know you can see the microphone, but it's all about content here, as I keep saying. It's not much of a running joke, I know, but two things I picked up from a dealer who I've only bought one book from before, and I'm keeping them for myself for the time being, and they're absolutely gorgeous and the prices were really good. And this is Robert Silverberg, as you see, The Face of the Waters, and it's in Grafton Royal format. Absolutely gorgeous. Pushes it further into the camera. Isn't that lovely? And this is from the very end of the 80s, and if you look at the spine, it says Grafton there. And I know I'm obsessed about imprints and things, but I'm a bookseller, and this is the devil's in the detail. And this is absolutely pristine. It's basically unread, I can tell. And it's from 1991. So this is the dying days of Grafton, when Grafton pretty much ceased to be a thing, and everything just got labelled HarperCollins after that. So this is going to be a beautiful one to read, so I'm very pleased to get that. It's Jim Burns' jacket there, and just absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, it's set on a water world called Hydros. Obviously, you know, we know where that comes from, and all sorts of sort of strange life there. And I have neglected later Bob, so I'm sort of very, very keen to get that under my belt. And as I say, I'm picking up stuff I haven't got. And I also got another one from the same dealer, and again a wonderful Burns jacket. It's just absolutely gorgeous. We're going to angle that, and we get the glare because there's so much light in this house. And that is Kingdoms of the Wall, with a rather cool alien there. And as you see at the base of the spine there, it's got HarperCollins, the Fire and Water colophon, or logo I should say. And yeah, absolutely lovely. And this one is from a little bit later. Let's see, this is from, I would say, 92, 93. Yeah, this is 92, so this follows this one. And because Bob was repumping them out at this point, a book a year, like he had done many, many years before. So I'm really, really pleased to have both of those, because I just love his work, and I love Grafton. I particularly like Grafton in the Royal format. Royal is my least favourite of the three hardcover formats. The smallest is Octavo, the medium-sized one is Demi, and this is Royal. I do like the Demi, but if you're going to have a Grafton and it's in Royal one, absolutely gorgeous. So I think that wraps up Collector's Diary for now. The question is there going to be much more before Christmas? One has to sort of be sensible. You know, there's big fuel bills coming, what have you, so maybe not, but lots of other things will happen on the channel. So bye for now.